Hello everyone, my name is Paulie and I'd like to welcome you to Realspace Raiders, the new Drukhari podcast. We are an alliance of 4 Archons, all hailing from the UK, and we're focusing on all aspects of Warhammer 40,000, be it the competitive meta and match play, painting and modelling tips, background discussions, and much, much more. I would like to begin by introducing you to the other Archons that I'm joined with at the moment. May I introduce you to Dom?
I'm Dom. I'm a competitive Drukhari player. I like to talk about list building, the current meta, and a lot of hobby stuff. My armies mostly consist of a lot of Venoms, Talos, because they're just disgusting, and the biggest distraction there is.
What's your favourite obsession, Dom?
Oh, Dark Technomancers. It is by far the best, and it's the only way to play Drukhari.
And I'm right in saying the last couple of events you've been to, you placed quite highly, right?
Yeah, so the last few of start of the year, I won one on a local one, which is pretty decent. Came up against Chaos and paired with Chaos Knights, which was quite a challenge. And played, I played Thousand Suns and I think it was Iron Hands as well, which was hard, but you know it's good. Then I came second. Playing you, Paulie, as well in that tournament. That was quite a fun one. Drukhari versus Drukhari. And yeah, I've just been having a lot of luck. Bad Moon Calf. Only lost one in the last seconds of the game, which was quite decent. And that was when Raven Guard Centurions were a bit broken.
Disgusting.
Yeah. I'm having a lot of fun with Dark Techno. It's just a lot of Venoms, a lot of Talos, and it's just spamming 2 damage.
Awesome. Let's introduce everyone to Joe.
Hello. I am a long-time Drukhari player, but I've had a few sabbaticals. But now I'm back in it with a vengeance. I'm more of on the painting modelling side. I try and do competitive, but I am awful at it. Yeah. Terrible.
Joe, if we were the court of the Archon, I feel that you would be the Lamian, you would be the courtesan. Like, is there a podcast or YouTube channel that you have not appeared on in the last 6 months?
There are a couple, but I do get around a bit. My mainstay one is obviously Look Out Sir, 40k podcast. If you haven't heard it, go listen. I've done a bit with Vanguard Tactics. And you probably would have seen my army recently on the Winter's SEO YouTube channel. I put it around.
Get around.
What's your preferred sort of obsession, Joe?
I run Blackheart all the time, but my favourite is Strife, because Lilith is my favourite character and model for the army. It's just so much fun just to dump hundreds and hundreds of attacks on people.
Amazing. Let's introduce everyone to George.
Hello, everyone. Name's George. I'm an old school Dark Elder player. Been playing them pretty much solidly since their revamp in 5th edition when they came out with lots and lots of very nice models. Playing them semi-competitively, going to a couple of events a year, a lot of local events. I do quite well at the local events down here in the southwest because the player base was quite small, but it's growing now since 8th edition dropped, because 8th edition is a really balanced and nice rule set, I think. Doing relatively well, and yeah, that's me. Just recently started on social media and showing off my painting talent since I repainted my entire army in a nice metallic dark green, which you can find on Instagram and stuff if you want to. Yeah.
You are a very good painter, George, and I think I first met you probably properly face to face at the GT final earlier this year, where you were nominated for best painter, but also you came very highly in the event. Correct me if I'm wrong.
I did, yeah. I did. That's probably the best. Well, it definitely is the best I've done, really, to be honest. So managed to qualify in Heat 3 and came 7th with a pure Drukhari army, and then went to the finals and managed to go 5-1 with a pure Drukhari army and came 5th overall, which was pretty amazing, to be honest. And then that was swiftly followed like a few weeks later with a local ITC event, my first ITC tournament called Plymouth at War 2020, and I came third in that. No, second. I came second in that. So the trophy's staring right at me. I came second in that and went 4-1, or was it 5-1? Can't remember. But yeah, I came second in that one, which was awesome. Like so, and that was my first ITC event, and actually my first ITC game. I've never played ITC before that, so I was really pleased with that result.
Very, very good. Very good.
So, yeah.
And obviously, I've introduced all of you as well.
Oh, yeah.
And obviously, I think everyone's aware of my
mention
name.
you, Paulie. So who are you?
That's it. So I'm Paulie. A lot of people on the internet may know me as Sky Serpent. I have been a long time Drukhari fan. Dark Elder were my first army when I started off as a kid. And I sort of took a bit of a break from the hobby, and I got back into it in 2009. And then when Dark Elder Drukhari got revamped, I jumped in head first, and I've pretty much been playing them exclusively since. In this current iteration of the Codex, I'd say Blackheart probably is my favourite Cabal to run. And I've almost been sort of revamping my army year on year, changing the theme. Duke Sliskus is love, is life. He's like my favourite special character ever. So obviously my army is themed around him and his Sky Serpents. So I've really enjoyed sort of running Wyches alongside them to try and be as fluffy, but also give myself a competitive edge. And this year I'm sort of pretending like it's 2018 and actually discovering the Talos meta. Who knew that, Talos were good? Hey. But no, I'm really sort of just enjoying Drukhari at the moment in general. And I think, we're recording our first episode in the middle of a pandemic, which by the time we put this episode out, I'm assuming everyone is still going to be in. So I thought I'd kick off a discussion about, what's everyone really sort of, working on at the moment. Joe, do you want to kick us off?
Well, I have utilised this to the max. So since it started 2.5 weeks ago, since I've been off work, I've built and painted 9 Talos on a Kronos. Repainted and rebased. Well, I've rebased my entire army. I've built and I'm halfway through painting converting a unit of grotesques, and then on my pile next to me, I've got 12 Reaver jet bikes, 10 Wyches, 2 Succubus, Lilith, and 10 Scourges.
So quite a bit then.
Yeah, I get so I split my week between having my daughter for 3.5 days, and then I paint for 3.5 days. But obviously, the 3.5 days I have my daughter, I still paint in the evenings. So I'm known on our other podcast as the guy that gets an army done in about a month.
It's on it.
Yeah.
You paint like a machine. Like you showed us some grotesques in the group chat the other night, and then the next day they're painted. I find it quite absurd. Joe's also a very good painter. We'll share everyone's Instagrams in the show notes for this as well.
Yeah. What about you guys? What have you been doing?
Don, do you want to go first?
Yeah, I've been looking into like some incubi, but the old ones. And getting my teeth in them, but I'm really just trying to get my hand on airbrushing. So because I've got like a purpley fade on all of my razor wings and Ravengers and that, and it's just trying to get like my last 7 Venoms painted. So I can have
7 Venoms.
Yeah.
I love that it's his last 7. So it's like, how many has he got already?
Well, I painted 2, and then I think in total there's 7, but there's just 5 to go. I actually, when I started making Drukhari, I actually didn't like the look of Venoms because I came from Chaos, which is it's really weird mechanic to how they play their game. And I came from Night Lords, which I just loved Night Lords. Loved painting lightning bolts down stuff and the whole terror tactics and all that.
Drukhari,
and then,
not really much of a shift then.
No, but it's the whole speed of them, because I think it was at a London event last year, and I was running the whole Derridios and Leviathan Purge spam with where you get to basically hit something and you get to reroll all your stuff against it, and it was really good, and I was doing all right in it, and then I got absolutely pancaked by a Drukhari player, and I was just so confused at how like brutal and quick they are. Because I was like, oh, look at all these like flimsy little vehicles. Oh, but then they're like saving all their feel no pains. Everything's got an invuln and everything's just crazy fast. So I was getting just it was just like a group of Reavers were like tagging a Leviathan, and I was just like, Jesus, I need some of this. Like the speed of it is amazing. And when I started looking at Drukhari, I love the Talos. Like Talos, I saw them and I was just like, oh my god, look at them. Look, they just look disgusting. They like rip you in half, and yeah. So I started off. So the first thing I did was put like 3 Talos straight away. I didn't know what direction I was going, and I was like, "Look, this is me. I'm coven through and through."
To be fair, as blind directions go with Drukhari, that's a pretty good one to start with.
Yeah, like at that time, I hadn't really like seen how good they could be, because the guy I played only had 3, but I know back then the people running 9 Talos, and like I know you guys increasing Talos like month by month.
It's a Talos arms race.
Yeah, it literally is. It literally is. And like now you guys are pairing them with Kronos for the rerolls. Also helps. But no, I like Venom's like that's kind of like my love now, because they're just so fast, and in the way I play with Dark Techno, they're just getting better.
Tell us a bit about why Dark Technomancer Venoms are so good.
Oh, right. So the way I play them, I pair them with the other obsession. I can't remember the name of it. But it
Experimental
Master of
Creations?
Mutagens.
Oh, that's
the one. Yeah. So on 6s, you auto wound, which is not against vehicles, but with your poison weapons, it will auto wound and troops, which negates some of the risk with Dark Techno. Because Dark Techno, you've got to when you roll 1 to wound, you cause yourself 1 mortal wound per gun, which is a bit annoying, especially because they're not in the normal coven, you don't get your feel no pain. So it's just a straight wound, you don't get to save it. But the good thing about it is it's +1 to wound, which means it goes up on 3. So like you're wounding Riptides on 3s. And when it gets through, it's also 2 damage, which means like when you're spamming like 50 shots a turn of venoms into people that are auto wounding on 6s, 2 damage, and wounding on 3s, it's a lot of shots, and it's just like it's just like, can you make a save? Go ahead then. I've just got like 10 more shots here, 10 more shots here, and I experimented a few when I played against you, Paulie, in that tournament with the running some flamers with them, because when you Dark Techno them, I know they're only like strength 3 flamers, but with the +1 to wounds, it makes them a little better, because then they wound troops and 4s, or if it's like just some scrubs and 3s. But with a random AP and then 2 damage, it gets a bit tasty. So basically, I just love the spamming of the 2 damage.
Which I think it has to be said that in the sort of current, I know the meta's kind of at the moment frozen because of the pandemic, but with Primaris in the sort of ascendant, I think the more flat 2 damage weapons you can get hold of, the better, really, because it really does cut through those Primaris Marines.
Oh, it really does. And like I played the 3 Riptides list with like crazy amount of drones and the commanders before Psychic Awakening dropped for them, and I won it simply because of the venoms. He was focused on Talos, which is the best thing about Talos. Everyone wants to get rid of them, because turn 2, when they're in combat, like they're gonna make like you pay. So everyone gets rid of them, and that's exactly what I want you to do. Like, I'll throw my Talos at you all day. I'm not going to be shy about it. I'll just throw them advanced up they go. They've got some shooting, which is nice. With special and with Dark Techno as well, it's +1 to wound on Haywire, so it goes off on 3s, and then the D3 damage goes off on 5s, which is pretty tasty. But it's the hitting on 4s, which is a bit swingy. But yeah, it's like I went up against the Riptide ring, and I killed all of the drones in 2 turns and killed 2 Riptides, and I was like, Jesus, But that's why I've got so many Venoms, because yeah, it's my love, it's my thing.
The question I've been saving for you, Dom, is the age-old question that we've been asking ourselves ever since the 8th edition Codex dropped: is to double Splinter Cannon or not to double Splinter Cannon? What's your
And yeah. So I was chatting to Paulie about this when a few weeks ago, because we were like list sharing and trying to keep up to being a bit competitive with some ideas. And it gets to a point like I really do like the 2 cannons because of the range. But it depends how aggressive you want to be, because I'm a bit of a counter puncher. Like I'll put racks with flamers in there to kind of like scream up the board and get whoever dares to come to the mid board, which works well to have the to have one cannon, 2 rifles. But then it's just the 10 points. Like after you have like 5 Venoms with double cannons, one more like 10 more points you could have, and take off all the cannons, you can have 1 more Venom. That's the thing. So me personally, I just go for the extra Venom rather than the 5 cannons.
Yeah, well, I can equally see, particularly in the Dark Technomancer Venom spam build, the value of those extra sort of 2 to, well, the extra 2 shots on average when depending on the range. But I think like you, I'm more inclined to keep them as cheap as possible and have just another Venom, like especially if you're spamming them, because as you said, like if you have 5 Venoms all with Splinter Cannon upgrade, you take those all off and you've basically got another Venom. Like
exactly.
See, for myself, I'm a strong believer in synergy, and for a long time I've been running, my Venoms as Black Heart with Cavalite Warriors inside with a blaster, and I find that 18-inch sweet spot is perfect, where your blasters, which we're always going to miss, right? If you fire one blaster, always miss.
They do always miss.
Always miss. But when you've got that perfect range, and I find, I tend to, well, it depends on the game, but if you want to sort of drift in the backboard, if you're 36 inches away, you're still raining, sort of 6 shots of Venom, especially if you're moving around your Archon with Ritz, etc., and the Aura. I still find you're putting out a decent amount of shots. However, in my recent lists, I've been trying to sort of maximize my points to fit in as much as possible, and my warriors have become naked, like just 30-point warriors. And I've shaved the points on the Venoms, and at times I miss it, at times I don't. I think I will go backwards and forwards, definitely. But I think I'm using the Venoms a lot more just to get people into position rather than actually using them offensively. There's actually times where I consider, the 3 Venoms, should I just get another Razor Wing for that points? But I think it's a whole other kettle of fish.
It is. But the best thing about Venoms, like, they only have 6 wounds, right? But they're -1 to hit, and they can very soon become -2 to hit.
Yeah, what keeps them alive is the fact that they're nigh on him. They're really difficult to hit, and they've got an invulnerable save, and then you take him with Black Heart, and then they've got the 6-up. Like I run double Black Heart battalion because I just love the cabals, and it's really good for getting double points on recon in ITC. So if I just bomb 2 Venoms into each table quarter, keep them hidden so you get recon turn 1, then you get double recon turn 2, which is always really, really good. But if your opponents actually manage to kill one and they've got to commit a fair bit of firepower to them, there's still troops to fall out afterwards.
I think it's also worth noting that they've got the inbuilt Flicker Field and Night Shield saves, which is great. But they're actually a relatively small model, and if you're in an event where the terrain is reasonable, they're not too hard to hide, behind a decent building or something. And obviously, your vehicles become much more survivable if your opponent can't even see them.
You can pack them into terrain really nicely. I actually play Venoms really weird. I backboard my entire army when I play because I know how fast Drukhari are. coming from another army being chaos, where you're like it's fast-ish, but you're kind of slow at the same time. I'll kind of wait for turn 2, kind of see what's like where everything is, and if I can make the most out of Venoms being in like the right places. Because if you're just throwing forwards, they can just get like killed quite easily.
I think there's a lot to be said. What you touched on originally, in that you came from Chaos to Drukhari. Aiming this question predominantly at yourself, Dom, and Joe, because you've got lots of different armies. Do you find that you've become better using Drukhari because you know how to use the other races originally?
100%. I like when the Marines came out, the guys in the channel, we decided to do like a Marine challenge, and we all decided to do like 1,000-point armies. In about 6 weeks, I'd amassed about nearly 3,000 points as Space Marines. I was like, I've done the challenge, and then I played them a lot, and I played all the different chapters with them as well. And one thing that I found very quickly is that I missed the speed running fists for a long time. But this army just plays like just sits there like a brick and just kills everything. But then in competitive games, it's really difficult to go out and grab and hold stuff.
I think that's where me and you met, wasn't it, Joe? Was at the finals, and you were running your Celestial Lions, but as Imperial Fists.
Yeah.
And you said to me, like, it was just you sit there, and it's not a very interesting experience for yourself to play as.
No, and then once I picked up my Drukhari again, and I was flying, I just started winning loads more games because I knew like the weaknesses of Marines because I've been playing them for quite a while.
I can totally relate to that as well, because
Yeah.
when the way I found it is I just could not get into the right positions. So like with my army that I ran last year, which I really enjoyed because I really like demons. I used to run 30 plague bearers, which used to just hug objectives with loads of nurglings, and I just have loads of dreadnoughts, and I could never get my dreadnoughts in the right places because as soon as they move, like they'll be like -1 to hit, and I didn't really want to move them too much just in case like you get like an Eldar guy on a bike like zooming up to tag you, and then people just got too good at zoning out bloodletters, and it was just a bit annoying. And like when I first saw that Drukhari player, like I mentioned before, like zipping about the board, I was like, this is fun. Like if anyone's listening to this podcast and they're thinking like, oh, you might give Drukhari a go. They are so fun. Like even in like the biggest competitive games, like they are just so fun to like work out how to maneuver somewhere, how you can get angles on this, and who doesn't love like moving like space boats around? Like they're so fast.
You mentioned about tagging a few times in this episode. To those listeners who aren't sort of aware of the term, what do you mean by tagging?
So say if you've got that's one of the more common like Forge World models that are out at the moment is you get Scorpiuses, and they're pretty punishing because they're like a vehicle that stays at the back like a mortar, and
It's like a whirlwind tank, isn't it?
Yeah, it's a Forge World whirlwind tank, and they're basically, I think, they're strength 6 -2 damage, and they don't need line of sight. And in ITC, that is very good because you can't hide your army from it. And basically, what people do to keep that safe, like when I played with mine, I'd try and stop someone being in contact with it because it's not like a super heavy or hasn't got the fly keyword. If say someone flew over with like a smash captain, which commonly with like Blood Angels and Chaos, just a guy like a fast dude with a jetpack jumps over my lines and charges it, and if it's touched it, I can't fire it next turn, and it is the most frustrating thing ever because you'll be sitting there like firing away all game. You forget about this one little dude who flies in, charges something, but then piles into the vehicle to be an inch away, and then that's it for the rest of the game. You can't use it because it's technically in combat, so it can't fire.
Super good.
In the Drukhari arsenal, what would you say the best units we have for tagging other sort of units, such as Scorpiuses and Leviathans, etc.?
Reavers.
Yes,
Reavers.
So
With a
fun.
particular red grief obsession, perhaps?
Oh yeah, so much grief. Yeah.
It's just their base movement of 18, isn't it? 18, and then you can advance and charge.
And they auto advance 8 as well. So their natural movement is 26 inches, which is obscenely huge. Like, it is so far. That's longer than a bolter. Like, it's longer than than a lot of guns out there. It's a longer range than that, and then they can still charge after it.
Yeah, it's the no man's land in between your deployment zones. It can cover in one turn.
Yeah, it's crazy good. I used them in the. I used a unit of 9 of them at the Plymouth at War ITC tournament, and they were just gold dust. Like, they're such an amazing toolbox unit that I've been an advocate for them for quite a while now, and absolutely love them. Like, I think they're very underrated in the Dark Order Codex, purely because their damage potential isn't amazing compared to some of the other stuff we've got access to. But just that speed is so good, and also access to combat drugs. I pretty much only ever run them with Painbringer, which is the +1 toughness. So boost them up to toughness 5, and that really starts to skew the maths on them when you think of the guns that can target them, which are usually sort of long range artillery. Obviously at the moment Thunderfire cannons are very popular. And the like. So we put them up to toughness 5, and those Thunderfire cannons start wounding them on 4s rather than 3s. And then you can use Hyperstim Backlash stratagem to make them push them up to toughness 6, which then goes from 4s to 5s. So you can really make them surprisingly durable. And if your opponent doesn't deal with them turn 1, they're going to touch something that he doesn't want to be touched, basically. And like those artillery, like those Thunderfire cannons, and they can get there so easily. It's, I love them, absolutely love them. And the model is just beautiful. It's the Reaver Jetbike model was the model that got me into buying Drukhari in the first place. Like, so.
I think the Drukhari range is one of the best ranges by far.
Oh, easily.
By far. There's probably, is there a bad model?
Oh, don't know. Like
the grotesque model.
Yeah.
The thing is,
I don't think it's a bad. I don't think it's a bad model. It's just the fact that it's one in a mono pose and it's fine cast, and it's £15 a model or £16 a model. And it's just it's probably the worst. But
what about Razor Wing flocks?
Yeah,
I was actually lucky, and I've got 12 of the metal ones before they switched to Finecast.
Yeah, the problem with them now is that you can buy them in a single base at a time, but it's 10 quid a base. Whereas the cheaper way.
How many points are there, base?
They're like
12, I think, or something.
I don't think they're even 12 points a base. I think they're like 5 or 6 points a base. They're super cheap, but the cheapest way of doing them is the cheapest way of doing them is if you buy the Beast Claw Raiders.
Oh yeah, the Eternal Spells one or whatever it is.
Yeah, it's one of the Endless Spells. I think it might be for Chaos Beasts, and in there, it's like 12 quid for the box of the free spells, but you get 3 flocks of birds in there, and then you could probably just pick those up on eBay. For just the 3 bases, and you're laughing.
Yeah,
they're really nice models as well, actually. Dialing the conversation back a little, George, as a player who plays predominantly as Drukhari, what pros do you find from focusing on just one army?
Oh, you learn it inside out. Like I mean, my memory's pretty good at the best of times, but I honestly don't think I actually need to look at the codex like ever. I pretty much got it memorized because I've played them solidly. Like, I mean, I have a Space Wolf army, but I haven't used that since 5th edition, back in the heyday of Grey Hunter missile spam. Like, that was kind of and then Thunderwolf Cavalry spam. I think me and you, Paulie, actually played each other at a doubles tournament with my mate Paddy, and me and Paddy were the team that ran the Thunderwolf Cavalry White Scar list, where you could stack up loads of silly and you were actually the only game that we lost to, which was funny. He whiffed completely the one thing that White Scar captains are supposed to do, which was take the head of the enemy HQ, and he had your warlord, your lovely Duke Soliscus, in his sights with no shadow field and 1 wound left, and he failed to kill him. And I slapped him round the face and said, "You had one job." And yeah, that was.
Do you know what? I remember that game. You haven't told me that was you guys.
Yeah, that was
were
us.
playing.
Yeah, that was us. So it was
Wow.
like you had our number like the entire game, because I failed a charge from a Thunderwolf Cavalry, which was big, and then you punished us with a Harlequin counter charge and some witches and stuff, and it was really brutal, and it was really to the wire. And then there was one final act on like the final turn, and it was the White Scar captain in combat with your Archon.
You had this, yeah.
We had it was Maelstrom of War, and we had all the cards. There was a Warlord trait at the time for White Scars that gave them bonus victory points if you killed the Warlord in combat, and then we had a card that did the same. We had Headhunter and like Kingslayer, so we could have gained like 3 + 3d3 victory points by killing your Archon on 1 wound with no shadow field, and he completely whiffed. And it was just like, it was funny. I just remember that.
Duke is life.
Yeah, but so I've been playing Drukhari solidly for years now. But I mean, I've got the advantage. I'm a really old school player. Like I started back in like 3rd edition. And I took a little bit of a break during uni, but as I said, my memory's pretty good, and I used to make it a habit of kind of having every codex and reading them and memorizing it and stuff like that. And also, I play a lot, and you play a lot of different opponents, like in local tournaments and just friendlies, and you sort of learn. It's always good, as you said, to know your enemy and know what your opponent can do.
Oh, 100%. I think being able to mitigate luck and dice rolls as much as possible by being able to sort of preempt your opponents. I think knowing, especially, we're really lucky to have access to Agents of Vex, where you can block a stratagem. But if you have that ability, it's actually knowing which stratagem you want to Vex. Like a good sort of opponent who knows you've got a Vex will try and sort of bait you out of that. Totally.
I think Vex it still is a very strong contender for most powerful stratagem in the game. I mean, I think the 4 CP hurt it a lot, and the nerf to CP regen, obviously, but it's still just having that in your back pocket is so powerful, really does change games. You need the knowledge of what your opponent can do to avoid the bait traps and really hit them where it hurts when you do pull out that vector from your back pocket. And you're only ever going to have enough CP to do it twice at the most. So you really need to make it count for something. And the way I've used it is, ironically, not to stop my opponent's super powerful strats that do exist nowadays, but even simple things like stopping the CP reroll, CP reroll.
Yeah, charges.
Stopping the CP reroll so they can't get that charge off reserve. Stopping that CP reroll to stop Gilliman from getting back up again. Stop it, all that kind of stuff. I would quite happily pay that to stop my opponent having that option to re-roll that dice when he really, really wants to or really, really needs to. And obviously there are the obvious ones like stopping Grot Shield for Orcs, shoot twice strats and things like that can be really beneficial. But it's just knowing what your opponent can do, and that only comes through either playing several armies, which obviously you guys have done, or just playing against those armies numerous times, which is what I've done, kind of with the same army or a very similar list. So you know which ones you need to stop, and you know which ones you need to look out for.
Oh yeah, and just target priority. Just knowing what units to shoot. Where and when. Like I remember, I played sort of at a recent tournament with friend Angus, who was using new Systems of Battle, and it was they're so good. I think they were probably stopped in their tracks, pun intended, probably a little early. Just as obviously everyone took a bit of a break from gaming. but I think actually when we return to events, whenever that is, I think actually sisters are going to come out in force. I think
Strong.
especially when a new army comes out en masse like that, and actually sisters are really expensive. I think you're looking at quite a lot of money to invest just to kit out everything that you want. But the Repentia, the Exorcist, there's so many sort of janky things they can do with their orders and everything about. Oh yeah,
I do really like the idea of the miracle dice system where they can control those, like, because there's nothing worse. We all know the pain of blasters when they eventually hit and wound, and then you roll that bloody 1 on the damage, and you're like, oh no. And having that miracle dice in your back pocket that has that 6, so you're guaranteed that damage roll.
Or when you're getting charged by something, you guarantee a melter pistol hits something in the face. They're just they're so good. But it was sort of facing them. I found it really interesting. I find it really exciting. I didn't play Genes in the Cults for probably about a year after their codex came out, and I was so excited to play them. But I find I don't really always know what to prioritize. So there's rhinos with Repentia, and I looked at them. I was like, I don't really want them hitting my sort of Ravager line, so I'm going to deal with those. And then I kept focused on those, where I was allowing the Exorcist to keep piling on sort of shots. And I think there's a strat the Exorcist can use to increase their strats or rerolls and stuff. And that was probably one of the contributing factors to losing the game, because I allowed them to continue. I find myself. A lot of my close friends, they moved away from 40k a while ago, and there's definitely sort of local clubs I could go to, but actually a lot of my games actually tend to be at events, and that probably hampers myself by not regularly playing, not regularly testing stuff. So but I just find events, if you do well, you do well, but for me it's about meeting people and getting different experiences. But that's the main thing, and that's where I met with you guys as well. You fantastic Archons. So let's continue a bit more about what we're working on. George, what have you been on? You've painted up a mistress of some sorts recently.
I have. I was well, partly is for a local online painting competition from the shop that I sort of grew up playing in. They were just doing a post your pictures online, and everyone votes for what they like the best. But I was inspired by the lovely Joe, our friend, and he was bigging up his love for Lilith Hesperax, and I thought, I've got Lilith, and she's been on my shelf for absolutely ages because unfortunately I only got her in the fine cast, and there was a lot of things I had to do to repair her. But I got inspired, and I thought, no, that's it. I'm gonna repair her. I'm gonna sort her out. I'm gonna make her look beautiful, and then I'm gonna paint her. And so that's what I've been doing this past week. But mostly because of the coronavirus outbreak, I've had to sacrifice my painting desk to my beautiful wife, who's working from home. So her work computer's on my desk at the moment. So I haven't had a chance to sort of do a lot of painting. So I've been doing building instead. So I've been doing a lot of build work for a couple of list ideas. One is more traditional, like Talos spam list, which is really, for me, I've already got 6 Talos fully made up and painted, but I just wanted a couple more. And the other one is for a triple battalion list that I want to work on, where it's like a battalion of each of the sub factions of Drukhari, because I just really like the idea of that. I thought it'd be quite fun. I'm a big fan of running because I think it just the symmetry of it, of having a match play, you're only allowed 3 detachments. And then we've got 3 sub factions within our codex. For me, that just synergizes so well. So I want to run 1 detachment of each sub faction, basically. And that's what
I think it just keeps Drukhari just so exciting that there's so many different play styles, so many different sort of avenues you can go down when you're list building.
Yeah, my Battle Scribe app is just full, absolutely full of ideas. And luckily, I've been collecting a long enough time that I can actually play test a lot of the ideas I come up with. I've got almost everything in triplicate, so to speak. So if I want to run 3 Void Ravens, I can run 3 Void Ravens. If I want to run the only thing I haven't got is Kronos, which we were talking about earlier, which is on my to get list.
What, 9 Kronos?
No, not quite that much. No, I think I'll start off with 3, for a under Dom's tutelage, a Dark Technomancer Spearhead. I've been thinking of trying to run with 3 Chronos.
Very good.
And then eventually I'll probably get another 3 and then run that as 3 squads of 2. Because I do think that, like Joe, I think the Chronos are actually in a good place right now. Like I think their cost, they're basically, if you think of them as a tough lieutenant.
I'm running 2 of them in mine
Yeah.
as a supporting character, as a support character,
Yeah.
and less of a hard hitting unit. So I'm running 1 with my my big unit of like 9 Talos, but which I'll probably run as 6, to be honest. I think 9 is probably going to be a bit overkill. And then running the other one with either a big blob of Wyches, because that just makes them so much better, or running them with a 10-man unit of Incubi and Drazar, which then makes Incubi viable then.
Yeah. Makes
Are you running them as
right.
prophets, Joe?
Yeah. Just to keep them alive, basically.
I think the Prophets Chronos are like good as a, like, because as I said, they're really tough. They're as tough as a Talos to kill, and they're significantly cheaper. And if you're just using them for the buff vector of Spirit Probe, which is the reroll 1s to wound in combat for any Drukhari unit, it's not even like linked to just Prophets of Flesh or anything. It's just any Drukhari unit.
Yeah.
Is really, really good. I've been crunching some numbers on Dark Technomancer Chronos with both the Spirit Siphon and the Spirit Vortex, which is the 10-point upgrade gun. And the numbers on them is pretty crazy. Like the actual, like obviously, Dom's a big advocate for the spamming damage too, and the Chronos for 80 points, I think it is. It's really cheap, and they can hit like D6 auto hits with their Flamer Siphon. That's strength 3 -2, flat 2 damage with +1 to wound because of Dark Technomancer, and then any 5s and 6s they get to wound causes D3 +1 damage. So
Really?
yeah, because obviously they get +1 to wound and damage because of Dark Technomancer. So their strength 3 is nullified, similar to how Dom was saying about how liquefier guns actually have some value in Dark Tech. And then they're always -2 AP. They're strength 3, so they're wounding most things in the game on 4s and 5s maximum. And any 5s they do get are D3 +1 damage at -2 rend. And they get D6 auto hits with their Flamer at 8 inches. This assault, so they can even move up and advance and still shoot it. And then their Spirit Vortex, which is 18 inches, D6 shots at ballistic skill 3 with the same profile. So on 5s and 6s, it causes D3 +1 damage. So as I said, I've been crunching the numbers in my head, and
that's very good.
Yeah, a unit of even just a 1-man unit can really do some hurt, and then a 2-man unit becomes pretty crazy. Like you can even potentially one-shot a knight with it if you roll pretty well. Like, and that's 150 points. So you're comparing it to basically a Ravager, and I think they're more durable. They're okay in combat. They provide that reroll 1s aura. They can also heal themselves. I think they're very good, and that's why I had 6 of them in my checkout box for Games Workshop, and then COVID hit, and it was like, oh, we're shutting down our systems. Like, damn it! But yeah, they are definitely on my hit list for wanting to playtest because I haven't got them, and I think they would be very, very good. Because also, as Dom mentioned, with the Master of Mutagens mitigating the fact that Dark Technomancers can wound them, Chronos have that kind of inbuilt, because if you wound anything in combat, you heal a wound back. So you can heal a wound off that. You can also use the Flesh Crafter's stratagem, which is if you're within 3 inches of a homunculus, you can heal D3 wounds on a Coven's unit. So yeah, so they've got like ways to heal themselves back, so the damage that you do to yourself with Dark Technomancers is mitigated, and I do think that punishment from those shots is pretty obscene, like I think anyway.
If you're running them in a unit and they do mortal wounds to themselves, do you pile all the wounds from both of them onto one model?
No, it's on the model, so it leads to these weird scenarios where you have multiple models in a unit that are wounded, and then you have to, when you take damage, it goes on the most wounded model. And if both models have the same number of wounds, then you get to pick which model takes the damage, basically.
Okay.
Yeah, all I was saying is that they're actually. I'm just looking at their stats now. They're pretty decent. Like movement 8, weapon skill 4, ballistic skill 3, like you said. Like strength 5 in combat is kind of nice. Toughness 6, but toughness 7 next to the homunculus. 7 wounds, 3 attacks. Like it's pretty decent.
Yeah.
They're really the 3 up save, 2 ups. Wow.
Yeah, and I think they're 65 points without anything, without any upgrades, with just the flamer, and then it's 5 points for the spirit probe, which is the thing that gives the reroll 1s buff, and then 10 points for the spirit vortex. So it clocks them in at 80 points for all upgrades, which I think is very reasonable for, particularly as in a Dark Technomancer. And then it's just a question of what you give them as the second obsession. There's lots of options. There's experimental creations, which gives them +1 strength, making them strength 6 or 7 in combat. I think 6. There's hunger for flesh, which gives them +1 to their charge roll, which is also very good. Obsessive collectors, which means if they do kill a unit in combat, they heal D3 wounds. There's another way to heal yourself. There's a few options. There's another one you could do, I suppose, is I can't remember what it's called, but it's the one that reduces Torturer's Craft to 1 CP rather than 2 CP, so they can reroll all wounds for 1 CP.
I've been thinking about that one, but with my Venoms, on 6 it just makes sense for.
Oh yeah, totally. But yeah, for the way I want to think of running them is just with Spearhead, so Homunculus and either 3 units of 2 or 3 units of 1, depending on point, like what else I want to have in my army. I think they'd be very, very good and definitely a competitor to the standard Talos that you see in a lot of Drukhari builds because they're just so good. They're so versatile.
And people will look at them and be like, I've never seen that model. What does it do?
Yeah, they'll probably just think they are Talos and then...
Why does your Talos have no guns?
Yeah.
Yeah, speaking about projects and what we've been working on, Paulie, you've been building some interesting stuff I've been seeing.
Yes, I've been working on a few bits and pieces. So I have had a Tantalus since before it was even released. I managed to get one at the first games there that they came out at, and I've owned 3. I now have 2, and I think similar to George, I aspire to own at least 3 of everything, and I'm pretty much there. And I don't have everything painted. Not everything's painted to what I'd say my highest standard would be. But a Tantalus, I think when you're composing your army, whether it's for aiming to get nominated for painting awards or just in general, I think most armies really demand a centerpiece. And I think for any sort of Drukhari collector, there's no better models than a Tantalus. I think if you never see one in the flesh, it's just such a phenomenal model. It's just so nice, so good. I think in the game, it's a bit debatable how good it is. When they first came out, Index, the cost was 350 points, which was pre-Codex, and I think when the Codex came out, especially being able to use Living Muse, etc. I think at 350, I think they're competitive, especially compared to the repulse and nonsense that we have to bear at the moment. But 400 points, I find them probably a bit too expensive. I think in Blackheart there's some good shenanigans. There's lots of different ways to run them. Red Grief, so Tantalus can move up 36 inches. Am I right in saying that? Something silly.
Just when they
and charge.
They have enhanced ether cells, and they just double their move when they advance.
And the Tantalus is pretty good in assault as well. And then, assuming you're not charging something which is going to wrap you, or you're not going to get wrapped the next turn, you'll probably have 16 witches who will jump out of something. Especially Cult of Strife. That's the obsession which has access to the free CP stratagem where you can attack again. So if you shoot something and kill it, you can then shoot the vehicle again.
Which is very easy to do with the Tantalus.
Oh, yeah, really good. I think there's a few others like so the Tantalus and the Reaper you can run as all the different sort of factions of Drukhari. So you have access to Coven. So giving it access to Coven means that you can give it +1 toughness. So you can make it toughness 7. It starts at 7. Is it toughness 6 or 7?
Starts at 7. And
Starts
you
7.
can
Why
push
can
it
make
to
it
8.
toughness 8? You
Yeah.
can pretend you're a Space Marine. It's really good. A
A Space Marine with an invulnerable save.
Yeah. No, it's really good. There's some access to so if you run it as Dark Creed, that's the Coven where you get access to the stratagem where you can snipe characters.
So funny.
And obviously everyone's favourite. I don't know. We mentioned Dark Technomancers this episode so far.
Pretty sure Joe keeps piping on about it.
Yeah, it's always Joe. Shut up, Joe. But they're obviously it puts out 12 strength 8 -3 to damage shots, and obviously straight away strength 8 winning +1 coming 3 damage. It's so good. I think my plan is still to run mine as Black Heart, just because I think I'll probably be running it in. I don't see myself honestly taking it to many competitive events, but I'm lucky to be returning to No Retreat this year, which is run by SN Battle Reports in Gibraltar. And I was really lucky my first time there to win an SN award. So I won like a painting award, which only 5 get given out each time. But which is really cool, really cool.
That can't be downplayed. Let's not downplay that, because the SN No Retreat tournaments, only like top tier painters go there. Like the armies on display at the No Retreat tournaments are exceptionally good. So to win a painting award at that is no joke. Is like, yeah.
Oh, and even sort of as you ramp up to the event, there's always a WhatsApp where all the different sort of players are in a bit of banter and stuff. And some of the models being shown, like I hope none of you are strangers to the Damien Pedley's like Deathwatch.
Yeah,
but
so
they
good.
are just obscene, and he's putting so much more stuff out. But there's so many good painters. I think at the moment, at time recording, SN are sort of drip feeding posts every day, focusing on a different sort of participant, and you can just see just how good some of the painters are.
All the YouTubers go there.
Yeah, it's
it's quite a big event.
Yeah,
in my opinion, it's the best. It's one of the best tournaments in the world. Like I think it looks amazing.
It is, and it's sort of some of my friends at first felt, is it a little bit elitist? And it's a case of it's not elite. It's it's a very exclusive event. That's the best way to describe it, in the sense that flying to Gibraltar and staying there, and obviously having sort of beer tokens that you'll need a little bit of money to go there. Not crazy amount, but if you're in a position where you're sacrificing a family holiday, it might not be as accessible. But you certainly have to have a nicely painted army. That there's 42 spots each time, and X amount get taken by sort of the winner from the year before. I think the person who gets best army. Everyone who won a SN award gets also entry in a discounted ticket, and I think they may do special spots for. I think there might be a military tournament where the winner gets to go to No Retreat, which is really cool. But it's kind of exclusive. But they do a lot of their they do a lot of research. Pardon the SN team. They get such a huge influx of entries, and they share a lot of the photos, and they're so good. And there's people that I didn't realise have been applying for years, and they just got in, and their stuff is jaw-droppingly good. But if you ever have applied for it, don't be disheartened, because I think eventually you will get in. I know you can ask the guys for feedback, and I know that's what some people have done before, and eventually have got back in. But they do research on you as well. That there's certain people that if people have got reps, they wouldn't want to invite them. So I don't know how I got in, but it's just such a phenomenal event. There's
I was lucky enough to play against and meet Pardo in the GT finals, and he was very complimentary about my army and was trying to push me to apply. But I think it would be very difficult for me to sweet talk my missus into letting me go to Gibraltar for a week on my own. But yeah, like it's one of my hobby goals is to try and go and attend that tournament along with best mate Paddy, who would also love to go, because I think very highly of the SN team and the quality of the painters that go there. As you said, you mentioned Damien Pedley, and I had the pleasure of seeing his army at the finals as well, and it's just so good. It's every single model in that army looks like a sort of golden demon entry, basically. It's just it's crazy. Like,
but the all the people that go there, like, they're really cool. I made loads of like great friends, and like you said, there's lots of YouTubers and influencers, as it were, that like the guys from Hellstorm. I've met them, and obviously Winters, who's actually, do you know what? He's one of the nicest guys I've met in the hobby. He's really cool. Guys from sort of Moorhammer, and obviously, Lawrence I've known before anyway from Tabletop Tactics. Is obviously there's lots and lots more, but it's a phenomenal event, and it definitely, it's not your most competitive event. Maybe I felt last year it sort of ramped up a little. So my aim, is to go back this year. I don't want to take something which is super competitive. I think when I went first to No Retreat 7 with my Drukhari, that was 2018, and I took just a pure Black Heart list, because they're quite restrictive in what you can take. So generally you can only run sort of one chapter. So it used to be just one battalion, one other choice. So for example, if you're running Space Marines, you could take say you're running Ultramarines, you could take an Ultramarines battalion, but you couldn't then take Blood Angel, or as a bad example, but like Raven Guard sort of Spearhead. It all has to be one sort of chapter. But they've opened it up this year to be, you can do double battalions, and they're allowing from the Drukhari detachment, if you can run sort of 2 of the 3 factions, but you can use obsessions now for both of them. So at the moment, I'm heavily leaning towards Blackheart Cabal, and probably Coven, seeing as I took Wyches last year, and probably a little bit of a debate about which Coven I go with, but probably lean towards Prophets. I wouldn't say no to Dark Technomancers. I might look at a different combination as well, but I think what I'm looking to take would be a decent backbone, some fun models I want to just paint, and a few surprises. But I think my main aim is for the Tantalus to come with me, because I think it'd be really nice, and I think I want to get it done as a centerpiece. And so SN do something very similar to what you might see at like the Warhammer sort of world events, where they have like sort of best vehicle and best squad. But for whatever reason, the Spanish guys who go around to look at models to put in the cabinet, they never picked anything of mine. So I really want to try and get in the cabinet, with the aim of trying to win something. I think if I do a really cool Tantalus, it might get in there, it might not. But what I've done for it is I've gone probably a bit too over the board. I probably should have just done a Tantalus and painted it, whereas I've converted it with a lot of different models on there. Because I just like to convert everything. I think if you see my army before, you'll see that there's probably no such thing as a stock model of my army. I like to make things my own. Well, that's what I like to do in that sense. I've been working on some other bits and pieces. I'm really tempted to paint my own Lilith Hesperax, having seen the 2 that you guys have done. And at the moment, I'm kind of sort of settled on my competitive list for when we resume. And then knowing what's going to be in my no retreat list, it almost sort of allows me to set my sights on what I'd like to paint. So, there's a few things in my normal competitive list that I want to redo, retouch up, maybe replace from scratch here and there. And then knowing what I need to paint for no retreat allows me to sort of focus what I'm going to do in this lockdown period.
I've got a question for you guys, because I've never ever touched on Witch Cult. And I just want to ask, like, how do you get into Witch Cult, and how do you kind of run them? What's like what are the tricks?
I think there's lots of ways, like, Don, to be honest. Like, I mean, I love Witch Cult, were like the thing that got me into Dark Elder in the first place. like I said, the Reaver jet bikes, but just the Wyches in general. I just love the thought of a bunch of basically unarmored gladiators running at the enemy and proving their own skill in battle is awesome, and they make a show of it. I love that whole thing. Like, it's not just about how many you kill, it's how much of a showboat you make about it. But I think the Wyches are actually in a really good place in this edition. I think there's lots of ways you can run them, like even just standard 5-man units in Venoms I've used a lot, particularly with Red Grief, because the reach they have is extremely far. Like, because obviously you got the movement of the Venom itself, then they can get out 3 inches, move and advance 8 plus d6, still charge with a reroll. Like, it's a pretty long way they can move. And their no escape rule is just invaluable. Like, it's so good at like tying things that your opponent really doesn't want you to tie up, and limits their options. So I think the Wyches are in a really, really good place. And Paulie is been a massive advocate over the past year for the Cult of the Cursed Blade Witch blob, haven't you, Paulie?
I adore Wyches, very similar to you, that there's just something about space gladiators that are on drugs and using like a myriad of different weapons. There's just something awesome about Wyches. They're probably, I find it really difficult to know what my favourite sort of part of Drukhari is, but I think Wyches are what, probably not what got me into Dark Elder, but they definitely made me stay. I started running Wyches properly competitively towards the end of 2018. 2019 marked for me like my year of the Wyches. And what I noticed is my gaming results just went up. I started placing more. I started actually winning events and doing a lot better. And I think it goes for some of the best advice is make sure your army can do different, like as much as possible in different phases. So my army was primarily a shooting army. With, you know, I flirted with a Farseer like in my army for a while, but I had very little psychic ability. But having a really strong assault phase is very important. And I used to run a battalion of Cursed Blade. So for those who don't realise or know, Cursed Blade gives you +1 strength for all of your Wyches, which is really, really good. Strength 3 Wyches become strength 4, which allows them to put out some decent sort of wounds, especially as they get quite a lot of attacks anyway. And obviously with Grave Lotus, which is one of the drugs, it allows them to go even as high as strength 5. And
winning spaces and 3s.
Yeah, which surprises a lot of people.
You could even hyperstim them and push them up to strength 6.
Oh, yeah, that's insane. So good. But I really, really enjoyed running them in massive units. So I generally used to run them in 20s, but then I dropped them down to 15s. And that was mainly because in ITC, their power level went a bit too high when they're at 20, so they can be marked for death. But I actually found 15 was probably the sweet spot anyway. But in blobs, obviously, if you run a large units, you suffer the perils of sort of morale. Whereas Cursed Blade have a fantastic rule where you only ever lose 1 to morale, which is really important. Especially, there's been a few times where an opponent's tried to try points, like one of my Wyches. And I know I'm going to fail the morale test. He knows I'm not running away. But then when I get to remove that, sort of single model, there's just so many things you can do with them. Also gives you access to a really cool relic, which is called Traitors Embrace. And it's, if you have the opportunity just to read through, the reasons why the strategy doesn't exist, and actually some of the background behind the relics, they're really cool. So the Traitors Embrace, basically, the succubus's rib cage just explodes into your face as she dies, and it's just so handy. It's on a 2+, you do D6 mortal wounds to whatever killed you. And I've killed a fair few characters and done some decent damage. Yeah, and
it's really good.
It's so good. And especially, I found it a bit better in non-ITC where you can probably throw away some units. And I used to generally run 2 succubi. So I used to run 1 with just like an archite glaive and a splinter pistol, and she wouldn't do too much. She'd sort of probably sit at the back. She had +1 weapon skill, but she would sit on objectives and she'd be there just to bubble wrap and protect against deep strikers. But I used to run one with a shard and an impaler. I'd give her hypex, so she'd be movement 10, so she'd be zipping around the board. Now and then we'd catch up with the witch blobs, but she'd just throw herself into fights. When sometimes putting up 4 attacks, which are strength 4 -1 damage 2. She can do some damage and tie up some units, and then sometimes explode. But no, I found them useful. But anyway, getting back to it, the main game plan would be that you'd put the 2 big units into the webway. Another unit of witches would be used as deck chairs, so that they'd sit backwards on objective. But what I would do is I would run the witches coming down from the webway. It synergizes really well. Turn 2 on the power from pain table. So on turn 2, you get to reroll your charges. So a 9-inch charge is quite difficult. But then when you get a natural reroll, obviously it adds to that distance, adds to that sort of possibility. But also I always try and save up at least 1 CP, and I generally try and do my most important charge first. And then, I roll my dice, and if I've got a 6 and a 1, then, naturally I reroll the 1 with a command point, where if I've got, 2 3s, 2 2s, etc., I reroll both dice. And a lot of it's about picking your targets. So 15, which is coming down, has the firepower of a venom, which shouldn't be, sneered at. And then I'd primarily run Shardnet and Impalers. And for the most part, when the witches come in, they're not there to kill units, they're to tie up units. Because obviously being troops allows you to become objective secured effectively, and take the different objectives. And I'd win a lot of games by doing that, bringing in back lines. That sometimes I'll be focusing my fire, maybe not on the most important targets, but to clear lines for the witches to get in, which allows you to use a no escape rule, which is probably one of the best rules in the codex. Joe, you've recently been using a lot of witches, notably Strife. But do you want to go through what no escape is and just how good it is?
Oh, it's amazing. So no escape, basically, if your opponent wants to fall out of combat from you, you do a D6 roll off. And if your opponent rolls higher than you, then they get to pull away. If they don't, then they get stuck. But if you've got a Shardnet and Impaler, then their dice roll becomes a D3, which means that it's a lot harder for them to fall out.
So good.
Yeah.
It basically means the only way they can fall back from you is if you roll a 1 and they roll a 6. That's really the only way they can beat you.
Yeah, it's so good. But I'm loving Strife at the moment. I honestly only put witches in my list recently just so I could run Lilith, because she's my favourite character. Because I was for a long time.
That's a perfectly fine reason, mate, to run something in the army.
Yeah, because I was running Allied, Drukhari, and Harlequins, and I used to love running the Solitaire. And Lilith is just as good as him, but cheaper to put on. Controversial, but she's so much cheaper.
Yeah.
And then if you keep it all in the same, and I like to keep it fluffy, I'll put her in it, and I was like, well, I'll chuck in a complementary unit of witches. But then because I run a big unit of 15, they tend to work as like screen clearer. Because I don't really deep strike them in. I leave them on the table, hide them somewhere, lurk around the mid table, like turn 1, then turn 2, and go and kill something. But I always give them the combat drug that gives them +1 attack. Yeah, so each one's got 2 attacks base. The knife gives them +1. Then they get +1 for charging, and then you give them the drug. That's 5 attacks each.
You could hyperstim backlash them to give them 6 attacks each.
Give them 6 attacks. They've done that, and if you
sorry, just plug in that stratagem there. It's one of the stratagems that's in our codex that no one ever uses, but it's really actually quite good.
I've used it a few times because if you hyperstim backlash, they've got 6 attacks, and they can run into a unit. Like turn 3, hitting on 2s, re-rolling 1s, and if you've got that Chronos nearby, it doesn't really matter what you're attacking because you get the re-roll 1s to wound. And if you say you wrap you attack a large unit, and then you have like a piddly little unit next to it. If you attack the big unit and kill the little unit, then that gives you a chance to pile in an attack again for free CP, which is
or even pile in just so you can touch something else with your shard nets to stop it from falling back in your opponent's turn and to stop your opponent from shooting your witches.
Yeah, definitely. And then, or you could use it on Lilith, who is a amazing character assassin. So she gets all of the attacks, and turn 3, her Tesla in combat. So on your roll of 6 to hit, she gets 2 additional hits. So she gets 3. So, but that goes up by 1 in turn 3. So she could put out something like 9 to 10 attacks in combat. So she gets to reroll to hit and wound. I've had her run into like 2 Space Marine characters, kill like someone like Lamartez, and then you pay 3 CP, and then they kill Mephiston straight after.
Oh.
And then for like 80 points, that is well worth the investment.
Like obviously we're going through the cults, and those are like the 3 main ones. It needs to be mentioned that like one of the best things that came out of the Phoenix Rising book, as lackluster as I feel that might have been, which is a discussion for another day, but the test of skill ability for witches, maybe not for the witches themselves, but definitely for certain units in the codex, can be quite good. Obviously the flyers stand out, obviously that +1 to wound against monsters or vehicles with 10 or more wounds is very good. But also I really like just the mini Tesla they can get with Berserk Fugue, which is any 6s you get to hit cause an additional hit, and that actually does add up when you have big blobs of witches, or you can make some pretty decent succubi with. I've recently been trying out a succubus with triptych whip. The adrenalite, so she gets 4 attacks base, +1 for adrenalite and +3 for the whip. Test of skill and Berserk Fugue. So on 6s, she generates an additional hit, hitting on 2s and rerolling 1s. And then obviously it's an agonizer, so it wounds everything that's not a vehicle on 4s. But with Test of Skill, she gets +1 to wound against vehicles and monsters that are 10 or more wounds. And then you can combine that with the Warlord trait called Precision Strikes. So on 6+, she generates a mortal wound in addition to regular damage. So that combines with Test of Skill to make her wound any 5s and 6s against monsters and vehicles that are 10 or more. She causes a mortal in addition. And she's hitting sort of a good, like Lilith, like a good, even though she's hitting with like 9 attacks base, or 8 attacks base, sorry. By the time she's finished swinging with her tester, she'll hit someone like 10, 11 times. And then any 5s and 6s on a vehicle or a monster are converting into mortals in addition to the regular damage of the agonizer. So she's actually pretty good. And for 54 points, you can't complain.
Oh God, no, not for something that cheap.
I've been using Acrobatic Display quite a lot, and I've actually found it. Do you know what? Really good. So Acrobatic Display is one of the new obsessions from Phoenix Rising, and it takes up 2 of your slots. So normally you get 2 obsessions to play with, but you can only use this one. But what it does is it means that your dodge, save, and combat for everything in that obsession becomes 3-up Invan, which is really good. Really good. It makes your units really hard to shift, especially if you're wrapping units and using shard nets. I found it great. I think I probably still prefer Curse Blade, but I think it definitely has a place. I find when I use witches, I don't necessarily want to kill things. I just want to get on objectives and just stay there. And so at the moment, it's just a bit of a debate for me. Is the 3-up Invan better than the only ever lose 1 from morale? But I found it really useful.
If you are running your witches similar to how I usually run them, which is as a minimum toolbox unit. So I'm in a lot of my army lists, I tend to run them in place of Carbolite Warriors in my Venoms, because I tend to run the Spearhead for my Blackheart to get that Vect and to get those wonderful re-rolling Ravagers. But then I buy 3 Venoms for my Blackheart Spearhead. I leave them empty for my Red Grief Witches to go into. I haven't actually playtested acrobatic display, but I think that would be comparable because the only thing I really use the Wyches for is just to limit my opponent's options, so they'll just jump out of the venoms, run and charge into something. I don't really think they're going to kill anything, but they'll be annoying. And I think with a 3-up invul, that would be even more annoying, so to speak. And I do find that they don't necessarily need to advance to reach the targets that I want them to reach. But I mean, most of the time I'm running Red Grief because of those wonderful, wonderful Reavers that move in so ludicrously fast that my opponent can do very little to stop them.
Let's move on to some more recent events. So obviously Games Workshop have been putting out some previews. So in light of Adepticon being cancelled, they've moved a lot of what they're going to show in their seminar to some online reveals in a Twitch stream. And stream number 3 came out just a few days ago at time of recording. Was there anything that excited every single Drukhari player in existence?
Oh god, yes.
Yeah, I think obviously I think you're subtly referring to the is it the Shadow Stalkers models?
K-Knight Shadow Stalkers.
Yeah, so I think every long-time Drukhari player saw them and immediately thought, hey, that looks like a Mandrake. And our current Mandrake models, whilst the sculpt is, I think, a very, very nice sculpt, it unfortunately suffers from the problem of they made it for a metal cast and then switched to fine cast. And as we've mentioned before, fine cast is not easy to work with. And for instance, I've got 15 like fine cast Mandrakes, and I just can't bring myself to fix them because there's just so many things that I need to do with them. And yeah, but there's one model in particular of those K-Knight Shadow Stalkers where he's holding a rather elongated knife. He's got a shadowy cloak over covering most of his face, and his right hand seems to be engulfed in flame. And
Perfect Bale Blast, isn't it?
Yeah, that to me just looks exactly like a Bale Blast hand and a Glimmer Steel blade. So, yeah, I think that's easily a very easy Mandrake conversion, and hopefully there'll be others that you can use to have a multi-pose unit in plastic.
Oh, I think what's more exciting is that we've seen 3 of the models, but there should be another 7 to 9 more models to come. Whether there's going to be some more ones who are similar to like the Shades with the cloaks made out of shadow. But I think there might be some more unique models, which, probably be added to a lot of Drukhari armies out there.
Yeah, definitely.
That new Inquisitor model is 100% going to make a great Archon conversion as well.
Yeah.
Because all you really got to do is change the catapult arm to be a sword, maybe replace the Power Fist arm to be something skinnier but still holding onto the cool little dragon thing, and then just give it a head swap. Because I've got loads of like metal Archon heads floating around from the old kit. I can chuck on him, and he just looks a bit more beefy then.
Yeah. I also think in a similar vein, I think it was revealed in the second preview, was that a former Harlequin model with the twin swords he's holding behind his back. I really, really like that. I think I'd be most interested in it if I was ever to finally develop my Harlequin attachments, which I've just been sitting in my cupboards. But I think it would make an excellent alternative, like a Troop Master or even a Solitaire, dare I say it. But he would also make some very interesting conversions for Dark Elder characters because he's just got a really cool, almost arrogant poise to him. And that base is really cool looking. It could quite easily be converted into looking almost like a shadow field enveloping him. And I think that's a really interesting pose as well. I thought it stuck out to me anyway.
I've been looking at the new Cow Elves and the Lumineth with the one that's just shown off in the recent stream. I think she's a wizard of some sort.
Cow Elves?
Yeah, they're like cows.
Is that what we're calling them now?
That's what I thought.
The Lumineths.
The Lumineths.
The Lumineth. The model with the like the face cloth sort of going across the face, like a face cloth would. Yeah. I keep looking at it, and at first I was like, I find this aesthetic weird in the sense that they've tried to, almost redo high elves, proper elves they're calling them, and then they've almost gone like such high fantasy that it's almost become a bit abstract and obtuse. But actually, do you know what? I really like them, and I think I look for inspiration for Drukhari conversions and anything elf in the Games Workshop range. And I kept looking at the model, and I was like, what could I use it for? I just realised how nice the cloak is that she's wearing, and the pose and the face cloth. And I was like, what could she be? And I think it just basically just came to me where I think she'd make a fantastic Lamian. That if you just trimmed the base down, I think gave her a dagger I think she's just clenching her body, and then replaced the plate
it's like
of
a pot, isn't it?
yeah, and then replace that with essentially a venom blade. I think she'd make a really cool Lamian. I'm actually quite excited to do that, and actually probably paint her cloak up like a bit of a Japanese kimono sort of style.
I've been playing around with the idea of making a command barge model, which I can proxy as a Ravager or a Reaper, because I've got the sail from the Tantalus, and I've got Vect's seat from his dais. So I wanted to make someone cool. I quite like the idea of having a female Archon kind of, but I really like that head with the veil, and try and make that kind of grieving widow all in black kind of look as her sat in her barge.
So cool.
That'd look good.
Yeah.
Really nice models that's bringing out recently.
Yeah.
Really nice.
And there's also the new Shadespire or Nighthaunt, or what is it called? Underworld's Dark Elf team coming out as well, which they announced recently of the new Witch Elves. So because Witch Elves are getting a lot of love at the moment, and Dark Elves, so there's all this amazing potential coming, which I really like.
Yeah, I do like the Daughters of Cain line for Age of Sigmar. I think if I had the time and money, I would love to use them as kind of the base of a witch cult list, so to speak. And instead of and as much as I like the standard witch kit, I think the pose and the energy in the Daughters of Cain models is just next level. Really, I think they just look so agile and so full of fury, and I think they're really good.
I used to run a big 10-man squad of the Daughters of Cain Witch Elves as a 10-man unit of Lamian back in 7th.
Oh yeah.
I could run them as a big squad, because I just run those around with Lilith, and they just destroy everything that they touched.
So we keep looking at conversions, and obviously we're quite lucky this year to get new models for Drazar and the Incubi, but we haven't had anything new since, you could argue, obviously, the Void Raven was a brand new model, but it's been present in the Codex since 2010. So we've had nothing new since then. So riddle me this: would you prefer to see some of the other fine cast models get redone into plastics, like Grotesques, and obviously sort of the Beasts and Mandrakes, or would you want to see someone return? Obviously, my vote's Duke Sliskus 10 times over. See some of the other sort of characters return, or do you want to see something new? Do you want to see a new troop unit? Do you want to see a new vehicle, a new Coven monster? What would you want if you could have anything?
Dom, do you want to go first?
It's a difficult one, because I like them to bring some of the models back, or maybe redo Mandrake, because I do kind of like the poses at the moment. It's just the fine cast is quite off-putting. Maybe a new Coven thing, because I'm heavily into my Coven. Maybe some Coven, or maybe some different variants of a Ravager, because we've only got one real tank, and it'd be nice to maybe have some different things we can add to it, and then maybe that'll spur them on to bring back some old models with them.
So George, what's your thoughts?
I think my first port of call would be to eliminate Finecast. Like I mentioned, the Mandrakes. I'd love a multi-part plastic kit of Mandrakes. I think that would look so amazing. With the potential of maybe having an alternative like Mandrake build, maybe like one that's either more focused on shooting or more focused on combat, or even like some sort of anti-psychic variant of Mandrake. I think would be quite interesting, and something that our army is lacking in general is some sort of anti-psychic support. And I think the Mandrakes or the denizens of Elendriac are a perfect opportunity to explore that in the Dark Elder line. And then on the other part of it, the grotesque model is that we mentioned previously. A multi-part plastic grotesque would be amazing, and I think that would, because it's one of the best units in the codex, and having that as an option to buy would lead to some really interesting lists. Because I think that puts people off, and there's a lot of fascinating conversions out there. Like Joe's just finished his conversions with the Gene Stealer Cult Aberrants, which look amazing.
They're good.
Yeah, and like I think having a multi-part plastic grotesque kit would be really good. So that's kind of where I would go. And as far as new units, I think there's a lot of scope in Dark Elder. Like there's obviously the denizens of Comorra are known for their experimentation, particularly the homunculus covens. So I think there's opportunity for like new and various wonderful pain engines and monstrosities they could conjure up. And as I said, I personally would be really interested in them, particularly because the laws just suddenly expanded with Elendriac suddenly getting a foothold within the core spire of Comorra itself, and Karudarak finishing his game of mounting all the skulls on the wall and opening up a portal. And I think exploring Elendriac is a really interesting avenue that they could take both lore-wise and also potentially model-wise. Because at the moment, the only denizens we've got is the Mandrakes, and we used to have a Karudarak rules, but he was one of the ones that got removed. And I think having a special Mandrake character would be really interesting. I think, and as I said, who knows what dwells within the shadows of Elendriac? There could be all sorts of horrors that are yet to be seen, and I think that would be quite an interesting avenue to explore.
Very cool, Joe.
I'd like to see like some new like characters in like the officer class. You know, like our Gene Stealer cult have loads of extra characters on top.
Like support characters.
Yeah, loads of support characters. So I'd like to see like an official like Dracon model, so like the lieutenant, an actual kind of like assassin model. So that's where your Mandrake kind of characters come in, and then like ones that like an anti-psyche unit, or one that helps with better and more accurate deep striking, stuff like that. And one unit I'd like to see come back is Trueborn.
Yes.
I absolutely adored Trueborn. But they're one of those units that kind of disappeared because they just didn't have an actual kit. But loads of people just converted them up, and I think I'd quite like to see them come back because they're way more efficient than Scourges, for instance.
I've got like 15 Trueborn all converted up with blasters on my shelf, like because obviously they got put to legend. So
yeah, I'd like to see those come back, and maybe a new variant, like a plastic variant on the Raider chassis. So like, we've got like a dedicated anti-tank and a dedicated elite version. I'd like to see like one with just lots and lots of anti-infantry guns that's better than poison, maybe with a strength value, like lots and lots of strength 4 guns, something like that.
Maybe like lots of shredders.
Yeah, lots of shredders, something like that.
Like a heavier version of a shredder that's like got a longer range or something. Like
or something like the Forge World Eldar Hornet. So it's on the Venom chassis that has lots of shredders on it, like something like that.
Interesting.
Yeah. What about you, Paulie? What would you like in?
Well, Duke Sliskus aside, who I can't wait for. When he eventually comes out, I'm going to declare it Duke's Liskus Day, I'm going to buy 8 of him. I can't wait. Literally, it's been my plan for such a long time that because Duke's just the coolest character ever. He's so extravagant that he never wears anything like twice. So my plan is to like paint 6 of him, like different color schemes and stuff. And then some like mild
one for each day of
conversions.
the week.
Yeah, and then like at the start of the game, like it's like my opponent rolls a dice. It's like that's what Duke's wearing today. Just a bit of fun.
You should have it so like you can get him in and out of his raider as many times as you can in a game, and each time you bring him out, he's wearing a different outfit.
So cool. And then he's just so good. And then for when you play Relic, I'm gonna just have another Duke just in gold because you can. And then another Duke because like a keychain or something. I don't know. Who knows? I think I would really like to see. I think get anything out of Finecast. I think it's very important. I think the court could get expanded potentially. I think for me, I think it's another conversation. We'll save it for another time. But I think they could really redo the court in a different way. I'd really like to see the Amble become a Drukhari beast. I think that's almost like a no-brainer. I'd love to see that. But something that I've dreamt about for a long time. So I'm going to pitch it to you. £95, okay? It's going to be a big kit, decent kit, but we're going proper slave barge. A 3-in-1 kit. So the first one builds you Days to Destruction, builds you Azure Vect, comes with all the trimmings, all your, not safe for work slaves, all the incubi and cloaks, and Vect himself, who you can go on a base as well. Gonna be awesome. It's gonna be incredible. And then you could build it in another 2 different ways. So you could then build it in like a heavy sort of barge. So it might be, probably got a bit more firepower than the Dace. It's got, I don't know, some sort of new gun, or I don't know, might have dark scythes in it, or void lances. And then the other one would be a super sort of transport. So probably packing more punch than the Ravager, but you're transporting, 30 model capacity. I think I just dream of the day of just getting more stuff like that. Or I think there's just so many different opportunities.
Without a doubt.
Yeah, that sounds great.
I know, right?
So how do we get Paulie in Games Workshop? And
So, everyone, thank you so much for listening to our first episode of Realspace Raiders. We hope you've really enjoyed it. If you've got any feedback on the first episode, please be sure to fire any questions and thoughts and critique to our accounts on Facebook and Instagram. So, guys, before we say goodbye, it's time to name the episode. What will our inaugural episode be called?
Ooh.
Go on,
I think it's quite good. Dark Origins.
Yeah, that's not bad.
That's also the first story in the Drukhari book.
Yeah.
That kind of makes sense. I was going to go with something lame, like Meeting of the Minds, but yours makes a lot more sense.
I was going to go on a pun, which I think a lot of people who don't know the band wouldn't get. But I was going to go Enter Drukhari. I thought it was quite fun.
I didn't get it until you explained it to me. Then once you explained it to me, I was like, oh yeah, it's actually a good idea.
One of my friends, Josh, he said we should call it Straight Out of Comra. I thought it was quite fun.
Yeah,
I'm done with that.
I'm afraid I'm not on the ideas at the moment. I'll probably come up with one after we hang up.
So, guys, what are we going to call it?
I say enter Drukhari. I think that's a good one because you explained it to me, and I thought there's a lot of people that will get that. And
yeah, there's enough metalheads out there that understand.
Yeah, I like
There
it.
we go. Thank you, everyone, for listening to the first episode of Realspace Raiders. We'll be back with another episode soon. Say goodbye, everyone.
Goodbye, everyone.